The wind outside howled, a wet, gritty sound that chewed at the metal skin of the geothermal energy warehouse. Mount Washington had been spitting ash and rock for almost a week now, turning the world outside into a monochrome smear of gray and white. It was late, past midnight, another swing shift no one else was here for since the roads had turned into a frozen volcanic mess. I was alone, of course, always alone now. I stood there in the control room, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to shift with every gust. My hands, calloused and familiar with every wire and valve in this place, were on the central temperature panel. Another routine check, or it was supposed to be routine. The main screen, usually a placid blue, showed a glaring anomaly. The geothermal core temperature, where we were supposed to be milking the Earth's heat, read a crisp -20 degrees Fahrenheit. -20 inside the core. That just didn't happen. Not ever. I stared at it, then at the auxiliary furnace warning light, which was blinking a mad, insistent red. "Damn it," I muttered, the words thick with exhaustion. I rubbed a hand over my stubbled chin, feeling the grit of ash even in here. Another glitch. Probably just a busted sensor again. This weather, it's a living hell for old thermal probes. I loosened the knot of my tie, which felt like a noose against my throat. This whole place, it felt like it was fighting back. I walked over to the backup monitors, tapped a few keys. The data streams from the primary and secondary sensors were wildly divergent. The primary showed the impossible cold, while the backups, though struggling, were still registering something closer to normal operating temperature, much warmer anyway. It had to be the primary sensor. Snow or ash had probably wrecked the line. These guys who installed it always cut corners. Always. After that, I decided to grab something to eat. The break room was usually warm, a small comfort in this desolate place. I pulled out a box of microwave mac and cheese. God, how I missed real food. I shoved it in the microwave, punched the buttons, and listened to the familiar hum as it started. My stomach rumbled. Then the microwave gave its usual beep. I reached for the door handle, already picturing something steaming hot. But a strange, acrid smell hit me first. Like melting plastic, maybe? Or something else. I opened the door, and the sight stopped me cold. Literally. The mac and cheese, still in its cardboard tray, was frozen solid. A block of yellow ice. Frost coated the edges of the tray. But the inside of the microwave, the metal walls, they were warm. Not hot, not cooking hot, just warm. Warm and empty. How the hell did that happen? I could have sworn I hit the right buttons. The light had been on. What the f... I stopped, shaking my head. My mind grasped for an explanation. Power surge? A power glitch affecting the heating element, but not the timer or the internal light? It was a stretch, even for me. And then I heard it again, a low, persistent hum. It wasn't the familiar drone of the ventilation system. This was deeper, more resonant, vibrating in my teeth. It was coming from the vent right above my head, a metallic, almost orchestral tone that seemed to shift pitch ever so slightly. All right, calm down, Ethan," I mumbled, mostly to myself. "The fan bearings are probably seizing up.
It's old, everything's old, and this ash is getting everywhere. I looked at the macaroni block, then at the inexplicably warm microwave interior. Still, the feeling that something was just wrong. A sour taste in my mouth, like I'd just swallowed a mouthful of stale ash. Back in the main control room, the hum followed me, a low thrumming under the scream of the wind. I was trying to restore the auxiliary power grid. It had been flickering again, creating brownouts that were causing more headaches than the volcanic ash itself. The monitors, usually so precise, were glitching. Big, chunky pixels on the screen, then lines of meaningless characters, like random code had just taken over. Then they all suddenly cleared. Every single monitor in the room, 5 of them, all snapped into focus, displaying the same thing. Not graphs, not data. A sequence of symbols. Lines and circles, intricate and almost organic, but angular at the same time. They looked ancient.
Like something you'd find carved into old rock, or maybe an alien language. My hands paused over the keyboard. I'd never seen anything like it in any system log. Not this facility, not anywhere. The lights in the room began to strobe. Not a gentle flicker, but rapid, chaotic bursts, turning the familiar control room into a kaleidoscope of distorted dimensions. Shadows stretched and shrank, bending around corners that weren't there. My own reflection in the darkened main monitor, when it wasn't flashing those alien symbols, seemed to waver. I stared at it. And then I saw it. The reflection in the monitor, my reflection, slowly lifted its right arm. The index finger, long and thin, pointed. It pointed to the warehouse layout schematic that was now overlaid faintly on the alien symbols on one of the side screens. A specific quadrant, an old, unused part of the facility. I blinked. My own hand was still on the keyboard. The reflection's arm dropped. The monitors went back to their frantic flickering, the alien symbols swallowed by the static. My heart was thudding hard and fast against my ribs. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, even though the room felt oddly stifling now. What the hell? My voice was barely a whisper. Lack of sleep, that's it. Just hallucinatory fatigue. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. I tried to laugh it off, a dry, rattling sound in my throat. But the cold dread, a feeling like someone had just poured ice water down my spine, was real. So real. I fixed my eyes on the schematic, the old compressor room. It had been decommissioned years ago, sealed off. No one had been in there in, well, probably decades. System error, I repeated, forcing the words out. Had to be. Optics glitch, nothing more. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't tear my gaze away from that spot on the map. An irrational urge, a pull like an invisible string, began to insist I go check it out. I thought it. I really did. For maybe 10 minutes, I paced the main control room, trying to force my mind back onto the logical path, back to fixing the power grid. But the image of that pointing shadow, so clear, so deliberate, wouldn't leave me alone. It was glued to my inner eye. Every flicker of the lights made it sharper. Finally, with a frustrated sigh that sounded more like a growl, I grabbed my toolkit. Gotta check it out, right? Protocol. Any anomaly, any structural issue, any sensor reading that's off, that's my job. That's what I kept telling myself, even if my entire body was screaming at me to walk away or run.
The walk through the lower sections of the warehouse was a nightmare of sound and shadow. The low hum seemed to follow me, sometimes fading, sometimes swelling into a loud thrum that made my teeth ache. The emergency lights, spaced far apart, cast only weak pools of yellow, leaving vast stretches of equipment shrouded in shifting darkness. When I reached the old compressor room, my flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing the door. It was heavy, industrial steel, meant to be sealed tight, and it was wide open. Just a crack, maybe, but enough to see the gaping blackness beyond. The latch was broken, mangled. This isn't right, I breathed, the words clouding in front of my face like steam. But it wasn't steam, it was my breath, freezing instantly in the air. The temperature here had plummeted. I clicked my thermometer. -40 degrees Fahrenheit. It was impossible. This wasn't some cold storage unit. It was a section of an active facility, heated. Yet a thick layer of frost covered every metal surface, clinging to pipes and old machinery like a shroud. I shined my light inside. The air was heavy, dead cold, pressing in, stealing the heat from my body. And on the dusty floor, amidst the old inert compressors, were the ash patterns. They weren't random drifts. Oh no. They formed a distinct, swirling spiral. Intricate, precise, pulling inwards as if drawing something from the air itself. It was the same symbol, or something very close, that had briefly flickered on my control monitors. A new realization hit me, a punch to the gut. Someone, something, had been here. It had opened this door, and it was generating this impossible cold. This was no malfunction. This was deliberate. I reached for the door handle, an old, rusted piece of metal, thinking I needed to close it to seal off this impossible cold, to contain whatever it was.
But the moment my fingers brushed the metal, a jolt, not of electricity, but of raw, mind-numbing cold shot through me. It wasn't the cold of the air. It was the cold of a deep, ancient something leaching warmth. My fingers instantly whitened, then burned, a searing, icy pain that felt like acid. I snatched my hand back, gasping, staring at the angry red welt blossoming on my palm. It wasn't a burn. It was a frostbite mark, a raw, blistering symbol. One that seemed to mirror the swirling ash on the floor. "No way in hell," I whispered, my voice cracked, almost gone. "Mathematics, physics, they don't work like this." My logical brain, the one I had trusted all my life, was screaming, dissolving. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This wasn't faulty wiring. This was something else, something utterly alien. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, the frostbite mark on my palm throbbing with an impossible, sickening coldness. I had to get back to the control room, had to record this, had to tell someone. But who? There was no one. The radio was dead, the satellite link gone. Just me, and whatever this was. Panicked, I practically ran back to the main control area, my boots slapping against the metal grating, the sound echoing hollowly. I fumbled for my phone, the ancient model I kept for emergencies, even though there was no signal, and started the camera. I needed proof. I videoed the control panel, the still flickering screens where vestiges of the strange symbols lingered. I took shots of the impossible cold readings, the mangled door latch in the compressor room. My hands were trembling so hard the footage was shaky. Then I went back to the first video, the one of the main control panel.
I scrubbed through it, looking for the weird text, the glitch. And there, for a split second, a blur of static, a flicker. My breath hitched. The screen had shown my face, but it wasn't mine. The eyes were black, utterly devoid of life, yet glowing with an eerie, faint green light. And the mouth, it was stretched, ripped almost, into a ragged, impossibly wide grin that pulled back to the ears. And from that distorted, horrifying image, I heard it. A faint, dry whisper, repeating my name, over and over. Ethan. I froze. My blood turned to ice in my veins. The phone slipped from my nerveless fingers, tumbling to the grated floor, hitting with a pathetic clatter. The screen cracked, then flared with a jumble of ruined pixels before going black. But the whisper, it didn't stop. It was still there, in my head, clearer, closer, louder than it had been coming from the phone, like it had never been on the screen at all, like it was coming from inside me. I dropped to my knees, shaking, my rational mind completely shattered. What was this? What the hell was happening? My entire life had been about logic, about fixing things, about understanding how the world worked. But this defied everything. This broke all the rules. The cold from my palm, the mark, it burned, it ached, a constant reminder. And the whisper. I had to find answers. I had to know. I dragged myself to the main computer, my fingers numb as I inserted an old data drive. It was a leftover from old maintenance logs from before my time, stored deep in the archives. Anything. I just needed something to make sense. The monitor flickered, then an old, grainy interface booted up. I typed in a command, searching for anything unusual, any unexplained events. But before the search could complete, the screen was hijacked, taken over. Old, black and white images and video clips began to play, spooling across the screen in rapid succession, a dizzying collage. Blueprints of this very warehouse, but with strange, almost occult symbols scribbled into the margins, intertwined with the engineering diagrams. Then, what looked like ancient texts in a language I didn't recognize, scrolling past. Words that seemed to describe a seal, an energy, and an ancient entity, imprisoned. It was here, beneath the facility. The images shifted again. Videos of what looked like the original construction crew, building this very place. Their faces, at first, were ordinary, tired, dirt-smudged. Then, one by one, they began to change. Their eyes bled to black. Their mouths stretched into those horrid, impossible grins, just like the one I'd seen on my phone screen. Their faces, my face, it was them. It was me.
The low hum, which had coiled around me for hours, suddenly boomed, filling the entire room, vibrating through the console, through the floor, through my very bones. And the howling of the ash wind outside, the monstrous shriek of the storm, joined it. Both sounds, the hum and the howl, twisted and merged, distorting into a single piercing scream. A scream that wasn't just physical, but was echoing inside my head, drilling into my skull. Then, the cold, it enveloped me. Not a gradual drop, it was instantaneous. My breath froze in my lungs, little clouds bursting from my mouth with every ragged gasp. The air felt brittle. And yet, the keyboard under my fingers, the one I was still desperately trying to type on, began to heat up. It glowed a dull, angry red, growing hotter, hotter, burning through my gloves, through my skin. It was like living coals. I yanked my hands back, screaming, a raw, primal sound that was instantly swallowed by the entity's roar. My palms, both of them now, were searing. I looked down, and through the blistering skin, beneath the reddened flesh, were intricate, swirling patterns etched into my skin. Burning, freezing, the same ancient symbols from the blueprints, the same shape from the ash on the compressor room floor. It was a brand. I collapsed onto the cold metal grating of the control room floor, my body screaming, my mind shattered. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. I stared at my hands, at the burning, icy symbols carved into my palms, glowing faintly under the frantic, flickering lights of the warehouse. The hum, the scream, it wasn't outside anymore. It was inside. A cold, shuddering sensation that spread from my very core, radiating outwards. It hadn't just touched me. It had entered me. I tried to push myself up, tried to flee, but my limbs felt like lead. And then, all the screens on the control panel, every single one of them, automatically flickered to life. They all displayed the same detailed map of the entire warehouse. On that map, dozens, hundreds of tiny, angry red dots began to pulse. Every corridor, every room, every single door, every single exit, all of them flashing red, locked, immovable. Then the map vanished, replaced by a single line of text, stark white letters against the black screen, appearing on every monitor simultaneously. Welcome home, Ethan. The words on the screen, those stark white letters, they stared at me. Welcome home, Ethan. My name, over and over in my head. The cold from my branded hands spread up my arms, a searing, icy fire that promised to consume. Every exit locked, every path sealed. It had me. It had me dead to rights. My logical brain, what was left of it, screamed. This wasn't a weather anomaly, not a system glitch. This was a hunter. And I was the prey. But why? Why me? And what did it mean, home? This wasn't home. This was a tomb. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest, not just from the fall, but from the deep, unnatural cold that had begun to settle in my bones. My eyes, I don't know, I felt blurry. My focus was shot to hell. But I had to move. I had to find a way out. Or, if not out, then to stop it. The old logs, the ones I'd glimpsed, a prison, an ancient entity, and a self-destruct protocol. There had to be one. Every industrial facility had one. A last resort. I stumbled out of the main control room, the flickering lights seeming to mock me. The hum, that low, resonant thrum, was constant now, a bedrock beneath the wail of the ash wind. I knew these corridors. I'd walked them thousands of times. Every pipe, every junction box, every patch of peeling paint. But as I moved, a weird feeling began to creep in. The main hallway, the one leading to what I hoped was the auxiliary server room, the place where the old deep-level controls might be, seemed longer. I swear it did. The gray walls, usually just gray walls, stretched. They looked taller,
like they were reaching up into a gloom that wasn't there before. And the lights, those sparse, broken fluorescent tubes, the ones that had been flickering for days, now seemed to be stuck, not flickering anymore. Just sort of glued onto the concrete, a smeared yellow stain on the surface, refusing to offer any proper light. I frowned, rubbing my eyes with the back of my burning hand. It didn't help. The image persisted. Fatigue, I muttered, my voice hoarse. Just exhaustion playing tricks. Or maybe these design guys were just terrible.
Trying to disorient people. I tried to pinch myself again, a desperate test of sanity. My skin, already raw from the frostbite, burned with a new kind of cold, a deep ache. That hurt, all right. So I wasn't dreaming. But the feeling, the deep sense that something was wrong, fundamentally wrong with the very structure of the place, it settled in like a stone in my gut. I kept walking, kept telling myself it was just my mind unwinding, just the stress. But the hum was growing. It wasn't a sound coming from the facility any longer. It was a presence. It was everywhere. And then, at a corridor intersection, a new cold washed over me. Not the sharp, brutal cold of the compressor room. This was different. It was deeper. It felt like a physical pressure, invisible but heavy, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to take a full breath. My lungs burned. It was like I was walking through water, heavy, icy water. And then I felt it. A light, tickling sensation on my cheek, then across my forehead. Like a spider's web. 1,000 tiny, invisible threads brushing against my skin. I instinctively swiped at it, but there was nothing there. Just air. But the feeling, it was still there. Ghostly, lingering. My skin crawled. And that's when I heard it. From the emergency PA system, the one that had been offline, fried by the ash and the power surges, I heard a sound. A voice. Ethan? My blood ran cold. My mother's voice. Soft, gentle, but it stretched. Like a tape reeling out too slowly, the sound elongating, melting. Anne? I gasped, stumbling back, slamming into a cold metal support beam. The impact jolted through me, but I barely felt it. Mom? My voice was a choked whisper. No, no, no way. I shook my head hard, trying to clear the sound from my ears, trying to reject it. It's trying to trick me, that's all. Just a sound glitch, a feedback loop. My throat was dry, painfully so. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the frigid, oppressive air. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to ignore the phantom touch on my hair, that delicate caress that felt so wrong, so terribly wrong. It felt like affection, perverted affection. I pushed myself away from the beam, forcing one foot in front of the other. Gotta keep moving. Gotta get to the server room. Past a row of decommissioned equipment silos. One of them, a heavy auto-sliding door, was right in my path. I reached for the manual override, my branded hand aching as I pressed down on the worn plastic. Nothing. The door stayed shut. I tried again, harder. Still nothing. And then, with a slow, deliberate thunk, the door began to slide. Not open. It slid shut. But it was already shut. It was as if it was closing tighter, reinforcing its seal.
It scraped against the frame, a loud, grinding shriek of metal on metal that grated on my nerves. This wasn't a malfunction. This was purpose. Then, on the metal surface of the door, dust and volcanic ash began to stir. It moved, not in a random draft, but with intention. The fine gray particles swirled, coalesced, connecting, twisting into shape. First just a vague mass, then ridges, indentations. It formed a rough three-dimensional shape, a face. Hollow, empty black eyes stared out from the ash, and a mouth, a wide, lipless slash. It was looking at me. And from behind that ash face, from the depths of the closed door, I heard it. A whisper. A man's voice. My voice. But it was stretched, distorted. A weird, warbling tone, like a broken record. And it was speaking my deepest, most secret fears. You always fail, Ethan. Always alone. A disappointment. Don't you remember? Couldn't fix anything. Not really. The words scraped against the inside of my skull, echoing, amplifying. It was my own voice, twisted into a mockery of my rational, self-deprecating thoughts. But it was real. I screamed, a guttural sound torn from my throat. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. I lashed out, punching the door with my good, unbranded hand, though even that one felt like a block of ice. It was solid, unyielding. My knuckles ached, a sharp, burning pain, but the ash face on the door just seemed to widen its horrible, lipless smile. It seemed to revel in my terror. "What the hell are you?" I hissed, my voice cracking, desperation clawing at me. "Get away from me!" The whispering increased.
It was no longer just in my head, but seemed to come from all around me, from the air, from the metal walls, from the very ash. My deepest insecurities laid bare, amplified, repeated. Failure, loneliness, worthlessness. I clamped my hands over my ears, desperate to shut it out, but it was useless. The sound was inside me, inside my head. The smile on that ash face seemed to grow wider, somehow, hungrier. It wasn't just reading my thoughts, it was my thoughts. It had become them, twisted them. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I had to get away. I had to get to the server room. The door was solid, unyielding, but there was a weakness, an emergency bypass on the upper hinge, rarely used, meant for machinery removal. I scrambled up the side, adrenaline coursing through me, ignoring the cold that was now a constant ache under my skin. My frost-bitten hand brushed against the icy metal, searing me again, but I pushed through it. I fumbled with the ancient release mechanism, forcing it open with a wrench. The door hissed, then groaned, and finally, with a pathetic, grinding moan, slid open just enough for me to slip through. I stumbled into the server room, gasping for breath, the oppressive cold and the omnipresent hum almost suffocating. The room was dark, but a few diagnostic lights on the server racks offered a weak, pulsing glow. I knew what I was looking for, an old black box, a relic, left over from before my time, before many people's time. It contained the deepest, most secure backups of the facility's logs, the kind nobody ever touched. I fumbled through the dusty racks, my hands shaking so hard I could barely feel anything. There, the box, heavy, cold metal. I pulled it out, almost dropping it.
It had a small, archaic screen on it and a dusty keyboard. With numb fingers, I typed in the old access code, the one I'd memorized from dusty manuals years ago, never thinking I'd actually need it. The screen flickered to life. A single ancient text file glowed on the display. It was a personal log, dated decades ago, from a Dr. Eris Thorne, missing according to company records. And then I read it. The words seemed to burn into my mind, illuminating a truth far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. "This facility isn't for energy," the log began, its digital letters oddly clear. "It's a prison, an anchor. We were fools. We awakened something that cannot die, cannot be defined. It exists as resonance, as thought. It doesn't want to escape. It wants to become us, to merge. It has been learning to speak, to feel. It latches on to fear, onto loneliness. It won't let go of anyone who hears its voice. We thought we had contained its influence. Foolish, so foolish." My blood turned to ice, even colder than before. It wasn't just hunting me. It wanted to merge, to become me, to assimilate me. As if on cue, the strange burning symbol on my hand began to tingle. Not just a burn anymore. It felt like a foreign nerve ending, a new sensation. And the cold in my body, the deep, pervasive chill, wasn't a discomfort anymore. It was a part of me, like a second circulatory system, a frigid current flowing through my veins. My gaze fell on the polished black surface of an inactive server screen nearby. My reflection stared back, and I saw it. Faint, just a hint, but undeniable. A pale, weak greenish glow in my eyes. Not reflecting off the screen, not a trick of the flickering lights. It was in them, like embers deep within. "No," I whispered, rubbing my eyes with the back of my hand again, desperately, as if I could wipe it away. But the glow remained. I held up my branded hand. The symbol wasn't just a mark. It pulsed, a faint internal luminescence. It looked alive, breathing. And I felt a strange urge, a pull, to touch it, to merge with the cold, to let it consume me, to stop fighting. No, God, no. I turned away from the screen, from my own alien reflection, my gut churning. Self-destruct. I had to find the self-destruct. That was the only way, the ultimate control panel. It was in a heavily shielded section deep within the facility, meant for catastrophic events. A nuclear meltdown cleanup, perhaps. Not this. But it was there. I'd seen the schematics. I ran, or tried to. My legs felt heavy, clumsy. The corridors swam around me, the lights strobing from blinding white to utter blackness in a frantic, disorienting rhythm.
Each flash caught the walls, casting impossible shadows, making the familiar structure feel like a nightmare. My own footsteps echoed, hollow and desperate. But then I heard others, heavier, deliberate, always just behind me, always just out of sight. I spun around, my breath ragged, but saw nothing, just the flickering darkness swallowing everything. When I turned back, a new horror awaited me. All the exit signs, the familiar green pictograms pointing to safety, were alight, but they no longer pointed to the outside. Every single arrow on every sign was now pointing inward, to one place, the geothermal core, the heart of the facility, the prison. And then the whisper.
Not in my head this time. It emanated from the very air around me, cold, smooth, seductive. It wants you to stay forever. The cold from the symbol on my hand wasn't contained anymore. It spread, rapidly, consuming my entire arm. I looked down, horrified, as my skin began to shift, a faint, grayish-blue hue, and beneath the surface, faint, glowing electrical veins seemed to pulse, snaking just under the skin, as though I was slowly, agonizingly, becoming a part of the very metal, the very structure of the warehouse, becoming it. No, no way! My voice was barely a sound. My eyes fixated on the signs, on that one terrifying destination, the core, where it was. I had to go there, to activate the self-destruct protocol, the ultimate fail-safe. It was a race against my own transformation, a race against the entity that was consuming me piece by agonizing piece. I burst into the ultimate control room, the air thick with hum and the shriek of the ash wind. The room was massive, ringed with obsolete, heavy machinery, giant pipes snaking across the ceiling. In the center, a reinforced console, and on that console, glowing with an ominous red light, were the buttons. The self-destruct, all of them, waiting. My hand, the one now marbled with gray-blue skin and faint green light, hovered over the central button. My finger, still trying to resist the creeping cold, trembled. But before I could press, the entire warehouse erupted. Not a metal groan, not an electrical discharge, a roar, a primeval, living roar that shook the very foundations of the earth. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from underneath, from within the core. Steel support beams around the room began to bend, slowly, sickeningly, like soft rubber. Cracks screamed across the reinforced walls, spiderwebbing outward. And from those cracks, from within the concrete and steel, a greenish, phosphorescent light began to ooze. It pulsed, like blood. The blood of the entity, seeping into the very fabric of its prison. Then, the main screen before me, the one meant to display the final countdown, flickered. It resolved into an image, my face, but not my own. The skin was the mottled gray-blue I'd seen on my arm. The eyes, utterly black, glowed with that faint, sickening green light. And the mouth, it was stretched, ripped into the impossible, ragged grin I had seen in my phone's reflection. The version of me that it wanted me to be. The image on the screen, this grotesque mockery of my face, reached out. It stretched its arm, its long, bony finger reaching, as if trying to pull me, physically, into the screen, into the glow. And a voice, no longer a whisper, no longer just in my head, but an overwhelming symphony of sound, the high-pitched shriek of the ash wind, the deep, resonant hum, and my own twisted voice echoed through my very skull. Join us, feel eternity. You won't be alone. My finger, now covered in those glowing green veins, hesitated. I saw it, a glimpse of my future, forever trapped, forever a part of them, a host, a vessel, to be one with this endless, cold, conscious energy. To lose all that was Ethan, that was me. I clenched my jaw, tears cold and stinging, streamed down my face. My body screamed in absolute agony, consumed by the burning cold and the insidious transformation. My mind, what little was left, fought. One last desperate flicker of resistance. I squeezed my eyes shut, blocking out the horrifying future, blocking out the reaching hand. I gathered every ounce of will, every fragment of who I once was, and I slammed my hand down onto the button. A dry, final click echoed through the roaring, crumbling room. The world shattered. A deafening, concussive blast ripped through the warehouse, tearing metal and rock apart.
The ground beneath me bucked and roared. I felt myself launched sideways, tumbling through the air, the roar of the entity, the explosion, and my own scream merging into one overwhelming sensation. Then darkness. Days passed, or maybe weeks, I don't know. Time felt different, elastic, liquid. The hum was still there, a constant presence in my mind, a low thrumming that never ceased. When they found me, the rescue teams, they had fought through a blizzard of ash and ice that had finally begun to loosen its grip on Mount Washington. I was buried deep amidst the mangled remains of the geothermal energy warehouse, half crushed under a fallen beam. My skin was cold. They said so. Unnaturally cold, even though the bitter winter had started to give way to a weak, watery sun. My eyes were open, I know that much, but I couldn't see them, not really. They were just vague shapes, blurs of color. They asked me questions. I heard their voices, muffled, distant, like they were speaking from the bottom of a deep well. I tried to answer, but all that came out was a low, resonant hum, a sound that wasn't mine. It was its sound. They pulled me out, put me on a stretcher, cleaned me up. They said I didn't have any serious physical injuries, no broken bones, just extensive frostbite and shock. But they noted the strange symbol on my wrist, the one that still glowed faintly, a weak greenish light, even under their flashlights. They called it a severe burn, a strange scar. At the hospital, the sterile white walls and the incessant beeping of machines couldn't drown out the hum. It was inside me, part of me. I drifted in and out of consciousness. In one of those moments, a nurse was checking my vitals. I don't know why, but I heard myself speak, not in English. It was a series of warped, twisted sounds, like the soft, maddening hum in the ventilation system mixed with the scream of the ash wind. Then, in a cold, dead voice, devoid of all emotion, I heard myself say, "It's not dead, it's just waiting." Then I fell into a deep sleep, or maybe something else. I never spoke about what happened in the warehouse again. They said I became withdrawn, silent. They said I was lucky to be alive. But no one understood that I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not truly. Anyone who came close to me, the doctors, the nurses, my bewildered relatives who came to visit, they felt it. A strange, bone-chilling cold emanating from me. And sometimes they would pause. They would look around nervously, as if they had heard something. A faint whisper,
A soft rustling sound, like dust motes sighing in the stale air, as if I carried a piece of that horror with me. A living, breathing echo. One of the nurses, the one who had checked my wrist at the scene, the one with the kind eyes, she came into my room a week later, hesitantly. She had a strange look on her face. Her hand was held out, and there, on the back of her hand, just above the wrist, a small, faint discoloration. A birthmark, she called it. It looked exactly like the symbol on my own arm, and it was cold. She touched it with her other hand, rubbing it. "It's just a little cold," she murmured. "Isn't that weird?" She smiled weakly. I looked at her, her kind, human eyes, and deep within them, so faint it was almost imperceptible, a tiny, weak spark of green. It was there, waiting.